Hello and good afternoon, everybody. I am delighted to be here as the current Chief People Officer for Clear Channel. That always worries me when people say that, because I'm thinking, current, does that mean not for much longer? Is there a plan I don't know about? So there'll be a theme you'll get used to as you go through this. So Navigating with Certainty is the title of this workshop, but actually I'm going to talk about uncertainty as we go through this. And I'm going to talk about something called imposter syndrome. So I'm having imposter syndrome feelings right now, and lots of other people are as well. I was sat in the green room earlier and people were like, what are you talking about today? I'm like, imposter feelings. Talk to me right now. I'm having them. I'm like, okay, will do. But I think we've been talking about imposter feelings in the wrong way. I think we've been framing it in the wrong way. So raise your hand if you have read something, attended a seminar on, listened to a podcast, read a book about imposter syndrome. Raise your hand. Okay, wonderful, thank you. So why are we still talking about it with an element of secrecy and an element of shame? Why is it still sometimes a dirty and hidden secret? And why is it being projected onto women? And sometimes exclusively onto women. And that's what I want to start unpacking a little bit today. So I'm not very good with slides, and I'm not great with agendas either. So this is going well. I'm not a massive conformist. So if what I'm saying matches to what's on those slides, we've hit the jackpot. I'm telling you right now. So if that happens, I'm like, whoo, happy days. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I want to unpack this syndrome that we call imposter a little bit. I want to talk about the imposter feelings that we have as women and link that to the feeling of non-belonging and the feeling of exclusion, which can be painful. But what I want to talk about is how can we use this as women as a superpower? How can we use this as an important feeling, an important insight that can help guide us and help give us that certainty to step into the light? And what can organisations and individuals do to tackle this syndrome that I'm currently suffering from? So I want to tell you a bit about my story. Now, before I do that, I just want to explain this picture, because this is my father on the left-hand side. This is a very young me in the middle, and this is my mother on the right-hand side. And we're stood on steps. It's hilarious. My mum is really short, so this picture should probably be the other way round, but she's delighted with it. She's like, oh, look at me. And I showed it to somebody the other day, and they're like, oh, your mum's really tall. And I'm like, I'll tell her that. She's literally out here on me. So let me tell you a little about the story and who I am. So I am a mother, a daughter, a wife, a sister, a colleague, a boss. I'm an executive coach. I'm a non-exec director for an organisation called FAM, which specialises in coaching for senior women. And I'm Chief People Officer at Clear Channel International. And one of the things that really, really strikes me about women is just how many roles that we play. All of those things. I'm all of those things. And sometimes they're really, really different. So which one is going to be showing up today? The mother, the daughter, the sister, the colleague, the friend, the chief people officer, the executive coach, the Ned. I mean, Jesus, I'm confused. Really confused. And I think it's really interesting because I believe that everything in life has a strength and a shadow side. And the strength that we have as women in able to play all of these different roles that we sometimes play has a shadow side. And that shadow side can sometimes be, where do I belong in each one of these different sets? We all strive for this sense of belonging. But if I'm being 15 different people in 15 different places for 15 different reasons, how do I belong in all of those places? Am I the working mum? Am I the professional? So let me tell you a little bit about this story. So I was born in 1976, which means you're all now calculating how old I am, which is I'm 46. I was born in a place called Bristol in England. My mum here on the right-hand side was a stay-at-home mum. Her mum left her when she was 13 years old, so she was running a home. from when she was 13, and then she felt it really important to stay at home with me and my sister. My father here on the left-hand side sold carpets for a living, was a sole trader, had a shop, sold carpets. We had a relatively modest life, so I wouldn't say we were poor. I'm not playing that card, but it was relatively modest in relation to the peers that I sort of associate with now. And I remember when I was just leaving primary school, my dad went to court to get me into a certain school in my area. So it wasn't a private school, it was a state school. But he went to court to get me into this posh school about 40 miles from where I lived, because he thought if I went to the school that was local to me, I would end up having 12 children and be addicted to heroin. And I get that all the time. My mother says to me all the time, if it wasn't for your father, you'd have 6 children and be addicted to crack right now. And I'm like, well, that might be easier, to be honest, Mum, than the life I'm living now. But hey, there we go. So I went to this wonderful school, and I had to get on a bus that drove me out of where I lived in this relatively modest, sort of quite inner city area, into this posh school in the country, where all of my friends had ponies, and on the weekends they were like, do you want to come to a gymkhana, Joe? And I'm like, no idea. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. They all had horses. I would warm their horses up for them before they did their gymkhanas. That was my job, stable girl. So that was the first part where I thought, am I really belonging here? Am I really belonging? And my father was really, really, really insistent and really passionate about me going to university, and I did. And it wasn't an amazing university. It wasn't a Russell Group. It wasn't Oxford or Cambridge or anything like that. It was a marketing degree. I did it. But I was the first person in my family to go to university. And everybody in my family has a vocational job. They fit carpets. They're an electrician. All of my friends at home are in vocational roles. So this right here, weird to them. You know, when I talk about my job and when I talk about what I do, they just look at me with this slightly mystified look, and they're like, so you just talk for a living? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. It's great. And they do the really important jobs. And then I found myself at this one point in my career, excuse me, where my boss at the time was abruptly fired. So she called me up from New York and said, hi, Joe, I've just been fired. Can you get me home, please? Yes, absolutely. I will get you on the next flight out, which I duly did. And then the CEO of the company at the time called me in. I'll never forget the words. He said to me, and we carry on. And I was like, oh, do we? Do we carry on? And I was really angry, obviously, so he got that, and fair enough. And then I was propelled into this job of being, from a talent director to a global HR director. Boom, there you go. So I had all of this coming with me, and now I'm surrounded in an organisation, and my peers did go to Oxford, and my peers did go to Cambridge, and my peers, of course, did a stint at McKinsey, because who hasn't? Me! Sorry. And I just felt really, really, really out of sorts. I felt like an imposter for that period in my life, probably 2 or 3 years. I felt like an imposter. I felt all of those horrible, painful feelings of they're going to find me out, I'm not good enough. Really irrational thoughts, like the CEO of a multi-billion-pound business with 25 years' experience in advertising has asked me to do this job because there's nobody else to do it. No, that doesn't really make sense, does it? No, but I believed it and I felt it, and it was painful and there was fear. And it took a lot of time for me to understand why I felt different and why it made me have these feelings of fear. And what I'm going to talk about is how we can start to harness some of these feelings through understanding and through work. But before we do that, let's unpack this syndrome that we call imposter. Because my first point is that calling this thing imposter syndrome is not helpful. We are fueling the very feeling that we are experiencing. Because imposter means a person who pretends to be someone else. Brilliant. And it's got undertones of criminality and fraud. And syndrome is a group, and obviously I Googled this, syndrome is a group of symptoms that may or may not have a pattern or may not have an indefinite cause. Helpful, thank you. So I'm feeling slightly out of sorts, feeling like I don't belong, not believing in myself, and you're going to give me a label called imposter syndrome. Brilliant, because that's making me feel 100 times better. So that isn't helping me. But when the two of those phrases come together, so imposter syndrome is a psychological state, and those are the important words, a psychological state where people feel or express self-doubt on their accomplishments despite factual evidence to the opposite. So you can read all of that. And apparently 70% of people suffer from imposter syndrome. So again, think about the language we're putting around that. I'm suffering from imposter syndrome. Really? I'm having a feeling. I'm having a feeling of uncertainty, and that's normal as a human being. So don't label it in this, I think, quite damaging way. So this 70% of people, I think is a bit, so I told you I wasn't very good at slides. See? Can you see that? I'm proving my point. Of people who touched on the behavioural science, and there's a million statistics on this. I think the 30% are lying, if I'm perfectly honest. I think everybody has feelings of uncertainty. For some, it will be more profound. And it can come into a couple of categories. You can have persistent imposter syndrome, where you have a nagging and constant self-doubt in your own ability. And I'm not downplaying that at all. That's a difficult place to be. That's a hard place to be. Or you can have more transient imposter feelings that change as the ebb and flows of life change. So if you're promoted suddenly into a role, if you are brought out of your safe social structure and put into another one, if you're put into yeah, I did that to you, didn't I, Laurie, recently? This is Laurie, who works in my team, and recently was like, Laurie, I think you're brilliant. Come and do this job for me. I can't do that. I think you sorry, Laurie, about this. Yeah, this wasn't contracted, so I do apologise. I'll buy you a drink later to compensate. But it was an interesting experience because straight away, I can't do that, Joe. I don't have the knowledge, but I think you're brilliant. And this is why I think you're brilliant. But I don't know this stuff. To which Rebecca and I said, Google it. The rest of the world do, okay? Big secret, just Google it and you'll be absolutely fine. And then imposter syndrome, or phenomenon as it was first called when it was introduced in the 1970s, was initially introduced in relation to high achieving women. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that attachment. And if you Google imposter syndrome, all of the images that you get up are women. And it's women who look like this, which isn't particularly helpful either. If you're doubting yourself and you're doubting your ability and you think, oh, just have a look into this, I'll Google it. Oh. And then you get all of these pictures. I mean, these ones down here, particularly on the left-hand side, I mean, they're very angry. It's not a nice place to be. So there's all of this rhetoric out there in the world that just isn't helping us, and it's distracting us from really understanding what these really genuine and important feelings are saying to us. Even J-Lo has it, I mean, really. So sold 70 million records, has rocked the Super Bowl or whatever it was J-Lo rocked, and even she thinks I'm not very good at this. So there's recently been a bit of a change in terms of the thinking on this. And I want to share some of that with you. So these are two Harvard Business Reviews, which are written by Roshinka Tulishan and Jodie Ann Burry, and they were written in 2021. So the first one, rightfully, talks about stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. Let's stop projecting these genuine, rational, common feelings that everybody has, and let's stop projecting them onto women, because that isn't helpful. What they also talk about in this first article is that when imposter syndrome was first talked about in the 1970s, it failed to recognise systemic racism, sexism, classism, and xenophobia. It failed to recognise that actually women will face all of those in the organisations they're part of, and it's systemic. And they failed to recognise the impact that that has on women and the feelings that they may have in relation to uncertainty. So I'm all for stopping to tell women that they have imposter syndrome. And then where this article pivoted to on the follow-up was around fix the places where women work. Stop blaming the individual, yes, and fix the place where women work, yes, and. So the challenge and the build I've got on this is you can tell women and men all day long to stop having, Laurie, stop having imposter syndrome. Immediately, if you don't mind. You can tell people that all day long, but we don't make decisions like that. We don't make rational decisions like that. If we did, there would be no compulsive behaviour. There would be no alcoholics. There would be no smokers. And that describes my family. So that would not be there. It's a little sad. So we don't make decisions like that. So yes, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. Yes, stop projecting it to women. But what I want to talk about in a minute is actually how do we tune into that and how do we use these feelings as a way to guide us? And yes, let's fix the workplaces where women work. So this is all around, this second article is effectively talking around building inclusive cultures. Yes, we want all of that. So many of us experience these feelings, but tend to keep them hidden or secret, fueling the very self-doubt that we're experiencing. There is a distinct relationship between feelings of uncertainty and feelings of non-belonging, and they can be prevalent in women. But societal and organisational systems are historically geared, and this is the point they were making in the first article, they are geared towards supporting men in those organisations. So if you have a feeling of imposter feeling, a feeling of uncertainty, for whatever reason, and you're seeking that place to belong, organisations are more geared towards engineering that for men than women. Fact. We all know that, and that's what we've all been working towards. But it takes a huge amount of time. Role models is the obvious example. You know, to get a sense of belonging, you want to see people who you think are like you, to create an affinity, a bond, a community. So the emphasis has shifted from blame on the individuals, yes, to fix the workplace, yes, but and. So I think the first thing we do is we reframe, not shame. So we take away this statement of imposter syndrome. You have imposter syndrome. Let's take that away and recognize these feelings for what they are, which is feelings of uncertainty, natural feelings that are there to guide us through our life. And let's tune in and listen to what we're saying. So how do we do that in organizations? And one of the first things is, there's two things to effectively focus on. The first one is creating safe spaces. I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. And the second one is just to be a bit smart about it. So if we really think about in organisations, when do we think people are going to have these feelings of uncertainty? They're going to have them when they're promoted into new roles. So let's capture that group and let's talk about feelings of uncertainty. And I'll come on and share in a moment how we can do that. Let's talk to junior talent groups and raise this concept of feelings of uncertainty early on in people's careers. So I had a conversation with our Bright Sparks. I don't know why I did that, Bright Sparks, in Clear Channel. Our Bright Sparks are our junior talent group. They're effectively the group of people who are early on in their career that they haven't been ground down with all the cynicism that people like me have. So we use them for innovation, for collaboration, etc. And I talked to them about these feelings of imposter a couple of months ago. And then we went out for dinner in the evening and they had quite a lot of the wine that was flowing around. And as the evening went on, about 5 or 6 people sort of sidled up to me and were like, "Joe," I was like, "Yes, those feelings you were talking about, I have them." Okay, can I talk to you? Yeah, maybe tomorrow. Or can you coach me? Maybe. Yeah. So the first thing is just to out it, reframe it, don't shame it. And let's think about those moments, pointed promotions, for individuals or groups or communities where we think they are a minority, where they are lacking a sense of belonging. Let's bring those groups together and talk about these feelings of uncertainty. And let's talk to those junior talent groups, because I created that imposter syndrome in them. I created it. I pulled them together as a group of individuals and said, you're top talent in our organisation, you're the future of our organisation, you're going to run it one day, we think you're amazing. And they were all like, really? Oh, okay. I'd loaded all of those expectations upon them. And then recognise the impact of bias. Don't dismiss it, don't downplay it, but don't land all of these feelings on it alone. Because imposter syndrome or feelings of uncertainty are individual. Everyone has a different story. I've got a different story. And, I'm not doing Orphan Annie here. I grew up in poverty, and therefore when I work with rich people, I feel really... I'm not saying that. I was different all the way through school, all the way through university, and all the way in my place of work. I am different. My background, the way I was brought up is completely different. And it made me feel like an imposter. But everybody has a different story. Don't just load it into bias. That's easy. That's obvious. And that's not fair. That's not representative. But do understand that relationship with non-belonging. People who are feeling this way in our organisation are feeling this way because they feel like they don't belong or they don't believe. And that is a point of inquiry. And this is where the superpower comes in. So instead of fighting it, instead of ignoring it, I say notice it. I say sit with it. I say inquire about it. I say work on it. And the most impactful way to do that is through coaching or group coaching. And that's the safe spaces I was talking about earlier. So safe spaces aren't just, we've got an inclusive culture, it's psychologically safe in my organisation. It's around actually engineering those times, engineering those groups where people can speak. So I'm currently coaching a group of 6 women from the financial services organisation in the UK. They are board-level women, C-suite women, in some of the biggest organisations in financial services globally. And every single one of them is talking about, and actually we had a session yesterday, is talking about their feelings of imposter. I remember having a contracting session with this one lady who is literally the second most senior individual in this global professional services organisation. And I said to her, tell me your story. Tell me about you. My career's all based on luck. Really? It's all based on luck. It's just the gift of the gab. I've just been very lucky. And she was instantly downplaying her achievements and her accountabilities. And actually, when you start to unpack that in a group coaching or even an individual coaching situation, we actually found the reason why she feels like that. Yes, she's in a male-dominated environment. Yes, it's slightly misogynistic. But actually her background, her upbringing, the feedback that she had early on in her career has defined her into this place. And it was only coaching that started to unpack that. It was only don't fight it, notice it. So there was another lady in the session we had yesterday. She's just about to get promoted to a massive job, huge job. And she said to me, yeah, I'm having massive imposter feelings, but I'm just going to fight it. Okay, you're going to fight? How are you going to fight it? How are you going to do that? Don't fight it, notice it. Sit with it. What is it telling you? Why are you feeling this way? And her and I know that because we've got the coaching relationship. So awareness, choice, experiment. Don't fight it, notice it. Why am I feeling like this? What patterns am I spotting? And being in the moment with that feeling and exploring it. So this is all relational coaching for those of you who are interested or know about coaching. This is Gestalt therapy based in stuff. So it's around raising your awareness of who you are and how you feel to give yourself informed choices so you can experiment. And that's the way I learnt to deal with my imposter feelings, my feelings of uncertainty. I know why I feel the way I feel sometimes, and I'm okay with it. I get it. I'm okay with it. And then just finally, I want to talk about from an organisational perspective. So what we were looking at here is the individual aspect. So coaching, group coaching, even just having a friend that you can talk to. But from an organisational perspective, so I work for Clear Channel, currently Chief People Officer. Maybe not tomorrow, who knows? I've been waiting to get fired for a really long time. I think that slight PTSD from what happened to my boss is lingering around with me there. But what we try to do at Clear Channel, so we do all the surveys that everybody else does. And 89% of our employees feel that they can be themselves at work. Brilliant. And 92% of employees feel like they belong. So why do we think, and I'm not here from a place of smugness, but why do we think we've got that sense and that feedback from our employees? Of course, it's luck. That's organisational imposter syndrome for you right there. But actually, what we've tried really hard to do over the past 5 years is focus on developing an adult-to-adult culture. So in a lot of our organisations, the communication, the way that we engage with our employees is often from a very parental place. You will do this. You won't do this. This is good behaviour. This is bad behaviour. This is how you get on. This is how you don't get on. This is how you win. This is how you lose. Really, really clear competency frameworks and behavioural models and lots of information around what you should do. And if you talk to an organisation and the employees within it in a parental way, then it's likely that your employees in the organisation will respond in a child way. So they'll either rebel, I'm not going to act like that, or they will comply. But the comply is not with sincerity or depth or authenticity. So this is transactional analysis stuff, if any of you guys are interested in that. So what we've tried to do is develop this adult-to-adult approach. So we've only got 2 things that we talk about in relation to our culture. The first one being fairness. So that's our take on inclusion and diversity. And we've focused pretty much exclusively for the past 3 years on developing inclusion, creating those safe spaces, giving people the opportunity to explore themselves and explore themselves in relation to this topic. And then we talk about Bring You, Shape Us, which is our employee value proposition. And it is effectively that. And it's a really, really, really clear deal where we say to every employee, bring you and you can shape us. That's the deal. So we value teams. We value team members. We value innovation with integrity. We'll give you a space to collaborate, but bring fresh ideas. So it's a really, really clear deal. And we don't talk about anything else. The rest is up to you. You know, it's not I shall do this or I shan't do that. So I think having that adult-to-adult environment is what is creating those inclusive cultures. So just to summarise, in these feelings of imposter, which you may or may not be feeling, reframe, don't shame. Check into that. Create the safe spaces. Think about in your organisation when you want to have these conversations and have insightful conversations based around coaching, not just, you've got imposter syndrome. Please stop doing that. Please get over that and deliver for me. It's not going to work. And then recognise, don't justify. So recognise that the majority of processes and systems in your organisation will be geared towards fueling this in your organisation. And that's why you need the safe spaces. Reflect. Don't dismiss it. So when you feel like that, or the next time you feel like this, just hold it for a moment and think about it. Why do I feel like this? When was the last time I felt like this? Am I spotting any patterns? And who do I want to talk to about it? And then rethink, don't adjust. So if we're looking to build inclusive cultures, don't just snip this here and change that here and modify this. You know, talent process. Here's the classic one of organisations. Yes, we're a diverse and inclusive organisation. When we do our talent mapping process, we look at the diversity statistics. Excellent. And what do you do with those? We look at them. That's great. So rethink, don't adjust, chuck it out. And if you really want an inclusive culture, then really think about that adult to adult approach, because that's the only way you create space for people to authentically check into your organisation and develop their own sense of belonging. You know, this isn't about complying, it's about finding their sense of belonging in the organisation. So, I think that's quite enough for me, and I don't know what that means when it's yellow, but I'm not sure it's good. Anyway, and it's counting down really quickly and making me anxious. So, what we're going to do is, I think this is a relatively safe space. Would you agree? Excellent. If you would have said no, I would be a bit shocked then, actually. So that's good. So what I'd like you to do is just congregate. So with the people around you, just form a group of 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter. And I just want you to have a really quick 10-minute conversation around when have you experienced feelings of uncertainty. So not imposter syndrome, you know, because that just gives me anxiety saying it. You know, we got ourselves in a right state in the green room earlier. It's like imposter syndrome. We're like, oh, I'm having it. But actually these feelings of uncertainty. So when have you experienced them? And that's all you need to talk about. When have you experienced those? And if you feel safe enough to do that, please do so. But do manage your own boundaries. And then the second question is, how do you want to continue these conversations? So if you're starting by answering this question, how do you want to continue these conversations? So apparently you're going to make the lighting a little bit moody and play some nice music to support us in having this conversation. So I will see you back here in 10 minutes, if that's okay. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer that question and to start to explore it. And I would encourage you to do more of that. And I guess the only final thing I'd want to say is that everything we've talked around today feels really, really simple, right? So call it something else. Create spaces to talk about it and talk about it. It feels really simple, but it is really simple. The effort and the work and the challenge, if you want one, is going to be in those conversations that you have and what you explore and what awareness you create in yourself and what choice you create for yourself to navigate with certainty and step into the light. So I've had feelings of uncertainty today. Great. What did I learn? And that's one I will contemplate. And I just want to thank you very much for your time and your attention. So have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you all later on this evening. Thank you.